The family reunion that ate my weekend. Full story included. It started with an innocent text. Family reunion this weekend. Be there. I read it at my desk, coffee cooling beside my laptop, and for a second I pictured a backyard barbecue with potato salad and polite small talk. I should have known better. The family that raised me treats the word reunion like a dare, a performance, and a competitive sport all rolled into one. What followed was 48 hours of escalating absurdity that felt less like a gathering and more like a live-action sketch show where everyone had forgotten their lines and decided to improvise. I arrived at my aunt's house on Saturday afternoon, suitcase in hand because my sister had insisted I stay overnight, just in case. The yard was already a carnival of mismatched folding chairs, a grill that looked like it had been through 3 wars, and a banner that read Family Forever in glitter that had migrated onto everyone's shirts. My cousins were clustered in a corner, arguing about whether the old family dog had been a better judge of character than any of us. My uncle was manning the grill with the solemnity of a priest, flipping burgers like he was officiating a ritual. My aunt hugged me like I was a rare artifact she'd been waiting to display. The first hour was the usual: hugs, updates, the ritual exchange of, "How's work?" and, "When are you settling down?" Then my grandmother appeared with a casserole dish and a look that meant she had a plan. She set the dish on the table and announced, with the authority of someone who had survived 3 wars and a mortgage, that we would be playing Family Feud. Real edition. She had printed questions, a whiteboard, and a bell. No one asked where she got the idea. No one asked why she had laminated the answer sheets. We all just cheered because that's what you do when your grandmother turns a Sunday into a game show. The game started innocently enough. Name something you hide from your partner, my grandmother read, and the answers ranged from snacks to bad haircuts. Laughter ricocheted across the yard. Then my cousin Mark, who has always been allergic to subtlety, decided to up the ante. He stood on a folding chair, grabbed the microphone my uncle had brought for karaoke, and declared that the reunion needed a theme. He suggested, old school talent show. Before anyone could veto him, my aunt had already dragged out a dusty karaoke machine from the garage and plugged it in like she'd been waiting for this exact moment her whole life. What followed was a parade of talents that made me question the definition of talent. My cousin performed a dramatic reading of a receipt from 1998. My uncle did a magic trick that involved making a coin disappear and then accusing my cousin of theft. My cousin's girlfriend recited a poem about quinoa. Somewhere between the receipt reading and the quinoa ode, my cousin's toddler discovered the microphone and decided to sing the national anthem in a language that sounded suspiciously like interpretive squeaking. The toddler's performance received a standing ovation, which is how our family measures success now, by how loudly we can clap for chaos. Dinner was a potluck that could have fed a small country. There were dishes with names I'd never heard and sauces that looked like they had been invented in a chemistry lab. My aunt's famous potato salad was present, of course, but it had been augmented with something called mystery relish that tasted like nostalgia and regret. We ate, we argued about politics for exactly 3 minutes, and then my cousin Jenna suggested a family scavenger hunt. She had printed maps, clues, and a prize. A trophy that looked suspiciously like a repurposed cereal bowl spray painted gold. The scavenger hunt was supposed to be a lighthearted way to get everyone moving. Instead, it became a full-blown expedition. Clues led us through the neighborhood, into the park, and eventually to the old community center where my father had once taught a yoga class to retirees. The clue at the community center read, "Find the thing that remembers everything." We searched lockers, peered under benches, and interrogated a pigeon that looked like it had seen too much. Finally, my cousin Sam found an old cassette tape labeled Family Memories. We celebrated like explorers who had discovered a lost city. Someone suggested we play it right there on the community center steps. The cassette was a time capsule of awkwardness. It contained a recording of my parents arguing about paint colors, my aunt singing off-key at a wedding, and my uncle giving a speech that included the phrase, "And that's why you never trust a raccoon." We listened, laughing and cringing in equal measure, until the tape ended with a message from my grandfather that none of us had heard in years. He said, in a voice that trembled with both mischief and tenderness, "If you're listening to this, it means we survived another reunion. Don't forget to call your mother." The tape ended, and for a moment we were all quiet, held together by the memory of someone who had been the family's unofficial ringmaster. Night fell and the backyard transformed into a theater of lights. Someone had strung fairy lights across the trees, and the glow made everyone look like they were in a movie where the budget had been spent on emotional lighting. That's when my cousin Mark, who had not yet exhausted his supply of ideas, announced a midnight talent swap. The rules were simple. You had to perform someone else's talent. I was assigned my aunt's interpretive dance, which involved a lot of arm flailing and the occasional dramatic pause. I practiced in the garage, tripping over a stack of board games and nearly knocking over the karaoke machine. When I finally performed, the applause was generous and slightly pitying, which in our family is basically the same as a standing ovation. Sleep was optional. My sister and I shared a room that smelled faintly of lavender and old books. We stayed up late, whispering about the day's absurdities and making lists of things we would never admit to on social media. At 3 in the morning, we were awakened by the sound of someone playing the bagpipes. Yes, bagpipes. My uncle had apparently hired a neighbor who played traditional instruments for atmosphere. The bagpipes wailed into the night like a soundtrack for a dream that had gone off the rails. I lay awake, thinking about how family is a series of small, ridiculous moments stitched together until they become a tapestry you can't quite explain. Morning arrived with the smell of coffee and the sound of someone practicing the tuba in the driveway. My aunt had organized a family photo shoot, complete with matching shirts that read "Family Forever" in glitter. We lined up on the porch like a choir of mismatched personalities. The photographer, who had been roped in by my cousin Jenna and looked like he regretted his life choices, instructed us to look natural. Natural, in our family, translates to a variety of expressions ranging from forced smiles to full-blown theatrical poses. The photo session ended with my grandmother insisting on a candid shot of everyone laughing. The resulting photo looked like a crime scene where everyone had agreed to smile for the camera. After the photo shoot, my aunt announced a family talent auction. She had somehow convinced a local antique shop to donate a few items, and we were to bid on them using Monopoly money she had printed with our faces on it. The auctioneer was my cousin Sam, who took his role with the seriousness of a stockbroker. Items included a chipped teacup that had belonged to my great-aunt, a framed photo of a cat wearing a hat, and a mysterious box labeled "Do Not Open." Bidding wars erupted over the teacup and the cat photo, while the box remained untouched, its aura of forbidden curiosity growing by the minute. Curiosity, as it often does, won. My cousin Jenna, who has always been the family's designated instigator, opened the box with the solemnity of someone defusing a bomb. Inside was a stack of old letters tied with a ribbon and a small key. The letters were love notes between my grandparents, written in a script that made the words feel like confessions. We read them aloud, and the backyard fell silent as the past spoke through ink and paper. The letters were tender and messy and human, and for a moment the reunion felt less like a circus and more like a pilgrimage. Then my uncle decided to reenact a family legend. He had always claimed that our family once hosted a secret midnight feast for the neighborhood raccoons, and he wanted to prove it. He set up a table with leftover pie and a trail of breadcrumbs leading into the bushes. We watched, half amused and half horrified, as a small army of raccoons emerged like a furry, masked battalion. They approached the table with the dignity of guests at a royal banquet, and my uncle bowed as if presenting them with an offering. The raccoons accepted the pie with the grace of creatures who had been dining on human folly for generations. By late afternoon, the reunion had reached a fever pitch. Someone suggested a family obstacle course. The course involved crawling under picnic tables, leaping over inflatable flamingos, and navigating a maze of caution tape that my cousin Mark had strung up like a crime scene. I found myself competing against my aunt, who moved with the surprising agility of someone who had once been a cheerleader. We laughed until our sides hurt, and for a moment the world outside the yard, the emails, the deadlines, the small anxieties that usually occupied my head, felt distant and irrelevant. Then the drama began, subtle at first, like a tremor before an earthquake. My cousin Sam accused my uncle of stealing his lucky pen. My uncle accused my cousin of hiding the remote control. Voices rose, not in anger so much as in the theatrical way our family argues. Loud, performative, and oddly affectionate. My grandmother, who had been the architect of the reunion, stepped in with the authority of someone who had seen every possible argument and had a solution for each. She proposed a family council, complete with a gavel she had borrowed from a neighbor who was a judge. We sat in a circle, the gavel placed in the center like a relic, and we took turns airing grievances that ranged from the trivial to the existential. The council was cathartic in a way I hadn't expected. People spoke about feeling overlooked, about the pressure to be perfect, about the small resentments that had accumulated like dust. My cousin Jenna admitted she felt invisible at times. My uncle confessed he was scared of getting old. My aunt said she was tired of being the one who held everything together. We listened, and for a moment the yard felt like a confessional. Then someone suggested we end the council with a group hug, and the hug turned into a pile of limbs and laughter that looked like a family trying to hold itself together. Night fell again, and with it came the fireworks. My uncle had procured a box of sparklers and a few legal fireworks that made the neighbors call the police in a concerned, slightly amused tone. We stood in the yard, faces lit by the glow, and watched as the sky filled with color. Someone played a song on the guitar, and we sang along, off-key and earnest. The fireworks felt like punctuation marks at the end of a long, messy sentence. The next morning, the house was quieter. People packed up, hugged, and promised to stay in touch. My aunt handed me a Tupperware container of leftover potato salad and a list of things I had promised to bring to the next reunion. As I drove away, I thought about how the weekend had been a collage of absurd moments and tender confessions, a messy, beautiful testament to the fact that family is not a single thing but 1,000 small, contradictory things happening at once. On the drive home, I replayed the weekend in my head like a highlight reel. There had been ridiculousness. The karaoke toddler, the raccoon banquet, the bagpipes at 3 in the morning. And there had been honesty, the kind that arrives when people feel safe enough to be messy. I realized that the reunion had been less about nostalgia and more about survival. We gather, we perform, we argue, and then we forgive, not because we are saints but because we are tired of carrying the weight of unresolved things. A week later, I received a text from my cousin Mark. Same time next year? I stared at the message and smiled. The answer was obvious. Of course I would go. Because despite the chaos, despite the occasional humiliation and the raccoon pie, the reunion had reminded me of something essential. Family is the place where you can be both ridiculous and real, where you can fall apart and be picked up, where the absurd and the tender coexist like two stubborn roommates who refuse to move out. So yes, I'll be there next year. I'll bring a dish that no one asked for and a story that will probably be exaggerated by the time I tell it. I'll stand in the yard under the glitter banner and laugh until my sides hurt. And when my grandmother announces the next game, I'll roll my eyes and then, inevitably, join in. Because family, in all its chaotic glory, is the only kind of madness I'm willing to sign up for again and again. Make sure to like and subscribe for more.